and I think Travis, who's one of our producer, who's playing in the background, is demonstrating flying on a joystick and a gamepad where we put a lot of improvements into sort of the control scheme. But we have some pretty cool stuff that comes out, for example, later on today in terms of much better fine control as you're targeting people. He's also got headlock mode that's on right now where you can focus on the target to follow it. So if it moves, you see the camera and sort of move with it a little bit, and then you sort of fly to bring it around. And the other big thing, which this is really only pertinent for backers of the game already, but we've sort of changed the targeting system around so that you use lag pips instead of forward-looking prediction points. And so lag pips are what modern military jets use. Essentially, is they show you where your bullets will land if you fire at this and where your target is. And so the nice thing about that is in this mode, and as long as Travis is flying like me, I think it's Crash Rollins. But there's a set. So Trav, do you want to? Okay, I guess I was going to try and get Travis to do the zoom mode if he wants. If you can you zoom, Travis? It's left trigger, D up and down on your target. There you go. So this is sort of the head focus mode that sort of keeps your. I don't know if anyone out here played Strike Commander, but it was something that I did a long time in Strike Commander that allows you to sort of focus on your target while flying. So it kind of gives you much better situational awareness, especially if you're on a joystick or whereas because you don't have the same like if you had a Oculus Rift, you could look around and do stuff like that. But anyway, he's blown lots of people.
We'll start taking questions from the audience. If you have a question, please put your hand up and we will have a microphone coming over to you.
Chris.
Go ahead.
Obviously, there's a fictional space race going on right now between Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous. Do you see yourself as the careful, considered USSR or the bold United States of America?
Well, I don't really sort of view Elite. I mean, actually, I'm a big fan of all space sim, and I backed Elite, and I actually encouraged a lot of Star Citizen. I mean, I publicized it on our site when they had their crowdfunding campaign. For me, I feel like there's not been enough space games out there, so I'm kind of just a big supporter of all of them. Elite's a little further along. I mean, I think the beta 3 or 4 or something dropped recently, like a few days ago. They're more focused, where they've got, they're not trying to go for all the walking around on foot and walking around inside your ship just yet. I mean, I know they've talked about doing that long term, but they're sort of more focused on sort of the core Elite experience, whereas we're trying to do this slightly sort of bigger first-person experience all around the stuff. So I think the games inherently have different styles. They also, the approach to the flight and the pace of the combat and stuff is different. So I think they're both pretty interesting, variable, and cool games. I mean, I play around with the Elite. Like I said, I backed it. So I kind of, I don't know what it's the post-Cold War, before like Putin, basically, right? Like everybody loves each other kind of thing is where I would, whereas I would say in that stage of Cold War analogy.
So I had a question as well, just about I guess how much, say with Commander, the original game, how your relationship with like your audience has changed. I mean, back then, we weren't online, we didn't have the capacity to communicate as well as we do now. And then moving right through past that I guess prime evil piracy era to one now where people are able to say, I want you to make this game, I'll give you money before you've even made it. How important that makes the audience, and I guess how responsible you feel, or how much more connected you are with the audience.
I totally love it. I mean, this is the most fun and invigorated I've had making games for pretty much ever. I mean, I would say maybe making Wing Commander was like special because that was when everything first came together properly for the first time for me. But the sense of like building something and the continual excitement and connection, because in the past you basically were very disconnected. You're working with your publisher, and then you would go to a trade show, and you would show it to buyers and press. And no offense because I know you guys like the games too, but there's something like great about really engaging and talking to people that they just love the same kind of game you love, and they're just like, just this, and they're full of ideas and enthusiasm, and there's not really a lot of cynicism which you tend to get in the business world. And so I love it. I mean, I think the team would probably tell you that they really like it too, because there's sort of excitement that they see, or seeing fans take some assets they've built and put a fan-made movie together with it. Like, totally excites the artists. They're passing around the YouTube links to that to everyone on the team. Like, oh, this is really cool. So I think that level of connection that's happening now is something that's really special. I think it's still something that the game business is kind of getting to grips with, of like how really to sort of deal with it. But I'm super happy about the level of connection you can get to people who are actually playing the games. You sort of feel like, okay, I'm yes, it's hard work and I'm doing all this stuff, but it really matters because I can literally release something and 5 minutes later can be seeing people play it on Twitch or seeing what people are thinking about in the forums, and so for anyone on a creative level, it's really great to have that instant feedback.
Do you feel it's sort of, I guess, increased by the fact that there has been a lull in space simulators? Like, the core fan base, we've been hanging out for these games for a long time and they just haven't been there. Do you feel that's, I guess, fired up that engagement to bring it even higher, or what's the nature of the beast?
It's kind of hard to say because this is the first time for me, but I mean, I definitely think that who started the group that Star Citizen matches up with. So PC gamers. So I think PC gamers tend to be more engaged and vocal, and the fact that this hasn't been there for a while, so maybe that's also made people become more engaged because they sort of feel like, oh, finally I've got something and I can get engaged. So, but I mean, I don't have any scientific proof for that because obviously there isn't like a lot of similar cases, but I sort of feel like there's a lot of people out there that say, it's definitely a common refrain that's like, I've been waiting for this kind of game for 10 years. So I think that Star Citizen, or to another extent Elite, or the other sort of space games that are coming around now are really sort of having the benefit of this pent-up sort of longing for this style of game, and it's pretty awesome. I'm not complaining at all.
So, do we have questions from the audience? Do we have microphones set up, or? Okay, we've got two down the front. I think you're going to have to come and just line up and... Okay.
With reference to how the genre kind of died out over the last decade, can you tell me what experience or reference you have of the games that were in the space, like the Ecosoft games or EVE Online? What are things from those games that you want to see in Star Citizen, or that you're definitely going to avoid with Star Citizen?
Well, okay, so on the EVE Online side, it's something that I off and on have played around for quite a few years, even when I was off making movies. So there's some things that I think EVE Online did really well. So I really love the way they sort of had the player and the community base sort of create a lot of like the drama and action that was happening in the universe, because one of the biggest problems with online games is you can't really generate enough content to outstrip what the audience that's playing it has the appetite for. So making something that's very player-centric and player-driven, I think, is very critical for an online game, and that's definitely something that's a core tenet of what we're doing with Star Citizen. On that level, on the other level, EVE Online for me, I like a more visceral experience. I want to be in the cockpit. I mean, like if you look at the first Wing Commander, I think we had the screenshot up there. It's like you're looking at your, hands on the joystick and feet in the cockpit, which is almost sort of like precursor to the FPS games. Just putting you in that place. And so I sort of, whenever it's sort of pulled back and more sort of slower pace, then that doesn't sort of connect me on an emotional scale as much. So for me, I kind of felt like I wanted a living, breathing universe that was, pretty player influence and driven, but in a more sort of visceral experience, and that's kind of what Star Citizen is. The Ego Soft stuff, I haven't played that much of the X series. A little bit of it, I sort of found like maybe some of it was just, just for my personal taste anyway, perhaps a bit too, I had to like know too much and a bit too complicated for me, but that's not to knock it, it's just that's just, that's my personal gaming preference. But they had a lot of nice detail in how they did some of their economy and all the rest of the stuff. So I mean, those are two examples of two people that still sort of burn the space banner in what you would think would be the sort of wilderness of space games. So hats off to them. And I mean, I definitely look at everything. And it's not just space games, by the way. I look at all games. I mean, I play a lot of different kind of games, and for me, you need to do that because that provides sort of inspiration. You take a look and say, okay, well, I think this game did this really well, or I think this game didn't do this well, and you can sort of use that to inform what you're doing on your own stuff.
Just alternate between microphones, so this one next.
So, what aspects are you most excited about working on where technology previously hidden you from even being able to consider?
Well, I think it's just sort of the level of scale that we're trying to achieve in Star Citizen. So, the fact that you can be flying a ship, a pretty big ship, and have 4 of your friends, or 5 of your friends, or 8 of your friends aboard the ship, and you're all operating various aspects while you're flying, while other people are flying other ships out in the same area of space, and you're fighting with them, and then you can go down and land on the planet, step out of your ship and sort of walk around the environment and go into a bar and find out if there's a mission you can have, or sort of go into a store and buy some personal weapons or arms for fending off someone that's boarding a ship. I mean, that level of fidelity and detail, in the level that we're sort of rendering it, and the level that we're going to be able to have that all run over the network is just something you couldn't have done even 4 or 5 years ago. And so with today's PCs and kind of sort of the ubiquitous of sort of fast broadband, it's possible. And so I think it's going to create an experience, hopefully with Star Citizen, that will be kind of very different than what people have experienced before in MMOs, and I think that will be pretty awesome.
So what you're saying is just kind of like what you saw in Freelancer, but much more dynamic.
Well, much more dynamic, and much more, like a lot more fidelity, right? So if you're a freelancer and you're flying a ship, I mean, you're basically just looking at your cockpit. And so, yes, it could be a big or a small ship, but you've got no sense of real scale of the ship, I mean, other than cutting out to a third-person camera, whereas this, in Star Citizen, you get a bigger ship, you're walking around it, it's got your own captain's quarters, and you sort of really can sort of feel it sort of feels more grounded, because we have the ability to sort of build stuff with that fidelity that we couldn't have done before.
Right, over here.
Okay, Chris. I asked you during the 24-hour live stream before the funding finished originally if we were going to have cloaking devices, because we all know what happened with mods and Freelancer. Because I would honestly love to stick a torpedo or click on General's tailpipe.
So I think our approach on the cloaking devices is, so we're not going to have any sort of Star Trek device where you disappear, but you basically will be able to manage your signatures so that you'll essentially disappear in terms of any kind of scanning or radar. But there'll still be sort of, if you can, there'll be a visual. If you can see someone flying around, they may not be necessarily on your radar, but you'll be able to see them visually. And of course, you'll be able to paint your ship, so it could be mostly black, and then at that point, it'd be pretty hard to spot, but that's kind of where we're at in the technology. We're going to have a lot more of that in V1.0 Arena Commander. There's a whole push for the signature system, which is how the scanners and the radars and the missiles all work, and how you're going to do that, and the various ship systems that we've actually already sort of put in a lot of the base technology in the game, but it's not really utilized right now for the gameplay. That's all sort of the 1.0 push to have all these different systems. So if you want to, you can sort of go dark, hide behind an asteroid, and someone flies by, they can't see you. You can pop out behind and try to take them out. So that's kind of the level of sort of, I don't know whether you want to call it real world cloaking, but that's sort of what the current design is focused on. So I think if you manage that, you'll be able to put a missile up someone's tailpipe.
Hi there. I'm Nick. I'm a student down from Canberra. I'm studying game develop at the moment. I know you've got quite a few senior developers and very industry experienced developers currently working with you on RSI, with RSI from Star Citizen. I was just wondering, are you bringing in a lot of new, young, developing students in, like essentially paving the way for the next generation? Because like, teaching it.
Really like yourself. Definitely. So I mean, like actually a really good example is, and I don't know if you guys have, there's probably people here that saw the Next Great Starship, which was this competition we ran this year, and we've actually hired two of the people already that were on the competition, and there's two more that we would like to hire, and there was one of the teams, Shimapan, so I don't know if you guys remember Shimapan, but they were all students, so they were at the Atlanta sort of game design school that was there, and so Daniel, he graduated, and so we've now hired him, and he's working on ships in the Santa Monica office, and one of his teammates, I think, graduates at the end of this semester, and he's going to come on board afterwards, so he'll start in January. So we're actually quite keen on sort of combining experienced developers and sort of really promising up-and-coming developers, because it's like a sports team. You sort of need the veteran that has the experience, but you also need sort of the rookie with a lot of talent, because they both sort of push each other, right? So the veteran sort of like can help the rookie with talent sort of get better, and the rookie with talent with all the enthusiasm sort of pushes the veteran to not be so cynical or burned out, I guess would be what we mean.
The Next Great Starship, that was very focused towards building new art side of things. Would you be looking at having maybe like a modding sort of competition to see maybe? No,
definitely. So like actually a lot of people that apply for us, like a big plus for us if they come from the modding community and if they show up and they show sort of mods they've done. So we've got a lot. Our lead technical designer in Los Angeles and our sort of engine technical director who's in Austin, Texas, Sean Tracy and Dan Tracy. Sean and Dan both came from the MechWarrior Living Legends mod that was done a long time ago, and they're great because when you're a modder, you like literally have to figure out how to like get things to be different and change in a system that you don't have documentation, you don't have the original programmers telling you what to do, and so you need a huge amount of experience. And Mark Abert, who's sort of one of our key game programmers that's in the Santa Monica office, he came from a modding community, so he was working on the Black Mesa mod that they were doing, which I guess was in Half-Life 2, in the Source engine, and he's a brilliant programmer, and I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that he sort of had that modding experience, so he's not like, oh, this is my box, this is all I can stay in. You're like, okay, here's a problem. He's like, okay, and he just goes out and he like figures it, sleuths through the code and figures out and figures it out, and it's great. So we're quite, definitely if you're, from our standpoint, if we're looking to hire people, if you've got sort of modding on your resume, you've got demos that you've done, all that sort of stuff is, that's great. In some ways, that's even more interesting to us than a degree from somewhere.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
We are going to have to cut the questions out to people who have already lined up, and we do keep it a little bit shorter, so just try and be a little bit more specific. Thank you.
I just got to ask you a question. One of the 14 million stretch goals was the inclusion of the fourth Endopod for Earth, and the other three are New York, Moscow, and Shanghai. I'm just wondering if you're going to end the bias against the Southern Hemisphere.
I think we ran a poll. I honestly cannot remember what the results of the poll that we ran was. I think we ran a poll to determine what the fourth location was. I could be wrong. I'm kind of sort of at a loss to remember whether we ran a poll or we didn't run a poll, but generally on those kind of things, we tend to let the community get involved in it, because for us it's kind of a fun thing for the community. So I think you just got to get the Southern Hemisphere to band together and make sure that your vote is a block to defeat, you know, the rest of the world.
In actual space science at the moment, there's a site called Perth that's considered an ideal location for a space elevator. So, yeah, if you want to keep it real.
Just had a quick question about the next greatest starship. I've never seen that sort of community involvement before, to actually have a televised competition where teams of talented modelers and sketchists and things like that around the world. Are we looking at ever getting a second season of the next greatest starship?
We haven't made the final decision, but in general, yes, that's something we want to continue doing. I mean, we may, I'm not sure whether it'll be a spaceship next time, perhaps it would be some different stuff. I mean, one of the problems with spaceships is they're so big and they're so complicated that it's sort of a real challenge to try and put it together in a way that, I mean, we had a lot of actually very talented teams that essentially had to drop out during the course because they didn't have the time to do all the work, and so we'd like to try and figure out a way to avoid a little bit of that, because, you know, we just sort of felt like there was some great talent that didn't get to go all the way through. Like the Shimmerpan guys, you know, if you look at the ship that they managed to finish after the deadline passed, it looks great, it looks really good in the engine. But they didn't have the time because they were going to school, they were doing all these other things. But it's definitely something that I think long term that we want to do on a lot of different levels, is sort of have you know, community driven content for the game as well. I mean, we have to do a certain amount of curating to make sure it sort of all fits inside the overall sort of plan. But you know, I'm constantly amazed. I mean, there's some really great sort of fan made like movies and you know, modeling, and so we kind of want to utilize that. I think that's kind of something that, you know, today's gaming world, you know, that's a pretty big part of it going forward. It's very different than it used to be, say, 10 years ago, and I definitely want to embrace it.
It was a pretty, just
The whole involvement where so many talented people actually got to make an actual official in-game asset that is then going to be then put in the game, instead of just an aftermarket modification to add something. This is something that's put together to actually.
And if you're in the event tomorrow, you may see something.
Well,
All right, last question.
What capabilities have been promised within the game that you found bitten you the hardest, either technically or from social reaction?
I can answer the question again. So
what features or capabilities have been promised for the game that you found have bitten you the hardest, either in technical difficulty or in social reactions?
Well, I'd say on a technical side, probably one of the more difficult ones that we're dealing with right now is the move to 64-bit for our sort of world space and precision on the maps. So like most game engines all work in 32-bit floating point, which is perfectly fine for first-person shooters, which is pretty much what most 3D engines are used for. But whenever you've got something like our game, which is in space, and you've got potentially millions of kilometers, 32-bit doesn't work very well. So we're moving the engine to 64-bit, and that's a huge thing. I mean, there's overall in the engine, there's about 10 million lines of code. Not obviously all of them we're going to be touching, but that's a lot. And you know, everywhere where you have positions or all the stuff, we've got to fix it up and make it work. So that's probably one of the bigger technical challenges. The other one would obviously be the whole like how to engineer the persistent universe that you can get, you know, potentially millions of people all in the same world and sort of running across each other's paths, but deal with the limitations of how many people we can have in one area, which are basically the sort of the instances. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about that. We think we have a good system for it, but that's definitely from an engineering standpoint pretty difficult. On a sort of game feature standpoint, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, we definitely have some level of. There's some sort of bigger arcing concepts that we haven't fully finished delivering, and so there. So the whole we think we got a pretty good plan for the economy and everything, and we're quite far along on it. But until it's all working as a complete closed loop economy system and it's not getting unbalanced, that's obviously something that is. I hope it works well. I think it will, but we've got to get all the players out there playing it. But yeah, that would be my answer on that question.
I hope you have enjoyed this conversation with the original Wing Commander. Please give it up for Chris Roberts.